Good evening, Dr. Croston. Good evening, class. This is my final paper for this class, The Threat of Violence and Extremism in America. At the roots of extremism are radical ideologies, radical religious beliefs, and pent-up anger and frustration, all of which can lead to violent acts ranging from hate crimes to terrorism. In the United States, the acts of violent extremism since 1995, resulting from the Oklahoma City bombing and after the 9/11 attacks on New York City, have made it painfully clear that Americans cannot ignore the dangers and the threat posed by extremism. Since 2000, the number of hate groups has increased by 56%. This is data collected and reported by the Southern Law and Poverty Center. This surge has been fueled by anger and fear over the nation's ailing economy, an influx of non-white immigrants, and the diminishing white majority as symbolized by the election of the nation's first African-American president, though that's a debatable issue and many would argue, as the case might not be. These factors also are feeding a powerful resurgence of the anti-government patriot movement, which in the 1990s led to a string of domestic violent extremist acts, including the Oklahoma City bombing. This growth in extremism has been aided by mainstream media, much which are figures and politicians who have used their platforms to legitimize false propaganda about immigrants and other minorities and spread the kind of paranoid conspiracy theories on which militia groups thrive. Some of those dangers originate beyond America's shores. But within the United States' own borders, multitudes of homegrown haters and extremists exist whose beliefs are equally radical and who can be equally dangerous. The population of the United States passed 300 million early in this century, which means that even the fringe of the fringe is still a large number. Moreover, because extremists are so willing to use violence to upset the status quo, they can cause harm in amounts far disproportionate to their number. Hate crimes can affect entire communities. Acts of terrorism can affect entire nations. That is why violence caused by extremism is a threat to America's national security, and it needs to be stopped at all costs. America, unfortunately, has no shortage of extremists. This in itself creates a threat to the peace that we in this country enjoy. Some come from the far right, primarily in the form of racist and anti-Semitic hate groups, or even anti-government extremists. Others come from the far left, including environmental and animal rights extremists. Some extreme movements originate within different social and cultural communities and organizations. Others come from the far left, including environmental and animal rights extremists. Some extreme movements may focus around a single narrow issue, such as abortion, and involve anti-abortion extremists who are prompt at all costs of destroying healthy clinics that participate in such methods of abortion. They are willing to go beyond and above the norms of the law in order to destroy healthy clinics that practice abortion because of their extreme agendas. Other movements may stem from ideologies that stress racial superiority, fanatic religious beliefs, or radical anti-political views. Whatever the case might be, all this points out to the root cause of extreme violence caused by extremist agendas that pose a threat to America's national security. Whatever their origin or nature, many extremist movements have adherents who are so committed to their vision that they are willing to break the law and to use violence to achieve their goals. The democratic process for change available to all Americans and to all those who respect and enjoy the peace and the fruits of democracy do not mean anything to those who indulge in violence and extremist agendas. Needless to say that Americans are of little use. Needless to say that to those who desire to indulge in acts of violence which are a threat to the security and the democracy of this country, is of little use to them. We have created extremism in America because the problems caused by extremists cannot be combated without knowledge and understanding of how and why they operate. It is therefore important to realize that in recent years, in the wake of a series of horrific hate-motivated violent extremism has emerged as a result of so much probably lack of understanding in terms of religious views, including the efforts and the agenda of those who try in every way to destroy the freedom of speech, to destroy the democracy and the peace of a civilized world. It is important, however, to understand that these efforts have gained a special sense of urgency. In recent years, in the wake of a series of horrific acts of violent extreme hate, these efforts have gained a special sense of urgency. And these efforts are the efforts to preserve America's integrity, democracy, national sovereignty, security, and the rule of law. Hate crimes include not only murder, but many other forms of harassment, intimidation, and violence. In the United States, attacks are directed most often against people of color, lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender people, including immigrants, or even people of the Middle Eastern origin or people of Asian descent, Jews, women, the homeless, and people with disabilities. It is my view, therefore, to say that by excluding these people from within the realm of violence and extreme hate, it will be a discussion of no justice at all to them. For many experience these things out of violence and extreme hate for their existence and for who they are. If our goal is to confront hate violence effectively, we need to ask ourselves a few questions that may help us to understand where we are and where we are going. What forms of law and accountability can help us to do so in order to overcome and to stop the violence and the extreme culture that continues to rise in our country? In a culture that values free speech and freedom of expression, we need to realize and ask ourselves whether it will ever be possible, desirable, or even effective. But yes, if this threat can ever be realized and be faced and be called what it is, then it is possible to overcome such a threat. What types of legal mechanisms can encourage us to work together across our differences to dramatically lessen the scope and impact of those violent expressions of violent extremism, racism, sexism, homophobia, anti-Arab, anti-Muslim, anti-Semitic attacks, and other forms of oppression that result from violence and extreme agendas. All these create a problem that comprises of so many components that threaten our national security as a country. What approaches will ultimately work against hate-motivated violence? Such violence is widespread and demands a powerful public response, which include not only murder, but many other forms of harassment that need to be addressed. For example, intimidation and violence continue to be experienced within so many spheres of society. In the United States, attacks are directed most often against people because of their freedom of speech, because of the democracy and the rule of law that they enjoy as a result of the great American Constitution. We need to understand that extremism resulting from hate and violence has no place in a democratic and civilized world. Such violence is widespread and demands a powerful public response. Repeated acts of disrespect of religious practices and symbols of religious beliefs or hate-motivated violence in the US should not be an excuse to those who hate the freedom that we enjoy in this country. Along with ready transmission of hateful speech and images around the world continues to increase. That in itself is a threat. Not only a threat to peace, but also a threat to the security that is widely enjoyed and highly respected and upheld in this country. However, in order to solve this threat of extreme violence, it is necessary to ask searching questions about appropriate responses that need to be addressed and be answered by those that are in authority in order to overcome this problem. At the same time, as much as this is a threat, we cannot uphold freedom and democracy by passing the very provisions that protect them. In other words, we have to face the truth and acknowledge that this is a danger to our society, that violence and extremism is a danger to our society and needs to be addressed and be eradicated. It is a threat, like a cancer spreading within our bones, that if not attended to will bring a distraction within our lives. Therefore, it has to be stopped. Alternatives are available, but they are not easy. Victims and perpetrators of violent extremism need to be stopped. They are a threat to peace in a civilized world. At the same time, they both require healing through a process that provides transformative examples of the just, accountable, and inclusive society we aspire to be. I hope and believe that changing the world needs men and women, people of all races and color that are strong enough to face the truth in order to help the weak to overcome the dangers that society imposes on them. Finally, I want to say thank you to Dr. Croston, my professor and the program director for this course, for this time of allowing me to present my oral defense for this paper. Thank you.